Love podcasts, hate nonsense. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast, ladies and gentlemen. The atmosphere in the studio is febrile. Just like Westminster.
My tanks are on your lawn.
And the nation waits with bated breath for something this afternoon, Ava.
Something.
If you're watching, there's a really limited window in which you could be watching this with this not being hopelessly outdated.
No. This could also be good fun because you could watch it back after the fact and then be like how wrong they were or how right they were and then make a decision about whether we're worth listening to.
Yeah. This is a referendum
if this is
on
after
whether or not
the
you should listen to the
announcement,
podcast.
If this is after the announcement, just drop a comment about how good or how bad we are.
Yeah, and let everyone know. That's why you listen to the PoliticsJOE podcast. What are we talking about in the first place, Ava?
Okay, so there are rumours swirling around Westminster of a potential general election. So let me just lay out a couple of things. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a cabinet meeting today at 4 p.m. This was meant to happen yesterday. It's actually happening today. That was just because of diary constraints. David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, and Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, one has been asked to come back from his trip abroad early. One has been told to delay his trip to attend this cabinet meeting. That's very curious. Why do you need all hands on deck? Now, what I think is going to happen... Actually, let me just start by saying about the dates. So today is the last date that Rishi Sunak could call an election that would fall before July. So if he called it today, it would fall probably the 27th of June, which would be Glastonbury weekend. Could be very helpful for the Conservatives because that would mean that around 200,000 people are away from the ballot box. Those people don't tend to vote postal. They tend to decide on the day, and that could be very beneficial. There's all people who go to Glastonbury. I'm going to take a punt in the dark here, probably aren't voting Conservative. So it could be helpful to have them away.
I met a Tory councillor who didn't vote in the Brexit referendum because she was at Glastonbury.
Point, there you go. Case in point.
Exactly.
Now, if he announces it tomorrow onwards, it would fall from the 4th of July. Now, that would tally nicely with what he said today at Prime Minister's Questions when asked by Stephen Flynn if he was planning to hold a summer election. Sunak I guess he filibustered a little bit and he said, well, as you know, I'm going to say something that will shock you. There will be an election in the second half of this year. That would indicate a post-July election. Now, one thing I thought was interesting about Prime Minister's Questions was that Starmer went, which we're going to delve into a little bit, on the infected blood scandal. Now, he was trying to get Rishi Sunak to commit to make certain commitments during Prime Minister's Questions. And to me, that signalled that Starmer is also feeling the heat of a potential election coming up. And he would like Sunak to commit to certain spending expenditures before a change of government so that comes out of the previous government's budget rather than a potential incoming Labour government budget. The final thing that I thought was really interesting, not really interesting, sorry, this is my prediction. I think it's not going to be election today. I think that he's potentially going to reshuffle his cabinet today. Rishi Sunak wants to go into the election with a cabinet full of MPs that are standing for election. Chris Heaton-Harris is not standing, so he'd like to shuffle around. There's also a rumour swirling that Jeremy Hunt could step down at the next election. He would not want to go into fighting a general election if his chancellor is not going to be continuing. So there might be a reshuffle and then an election announcement.
So you're saying reshuffle and then a definite election?
I would say reshuffle today, possibly tomorrow, election in the coming days. That would put the election in the second half of the year. That means that he hasn't misled the House today. There was another really important point. That was it. Inflation hit 2.3% today. That means that the government have now hit, in their minds, all 5 targets, all 5 pledges that they set out late last year. And the small boats crisis that they promised to tackle, the Rwanda plan, if they let that run on too long, that is actually going to become a problem for him because at the moment he can say we've got the Rwanda plan up and running, therefore we've hit the 5 pledges. As this travels onwards, if the Rwanda plan starts to fail, that means he's reneged on a pledge. He won't want to go into an election having reneged.
Yeah, I think it's...
Sorry, that was very long, everyone.
That was brilliant, Ava. That's why we pay you the big bucks.
That's why you pay me the same as you.
Yeah, that's what we're paid. The same. Isn't that ridiculous, listeners?
Democratic.
We're a workers-owned company. That's not true. Anyway, I think you mentioned the Rwanda plan there. Having an election in the summer, say we have a beautiful June, a glorious June, you will have GB News crews on a boat every single day showing refugees crossing the channel. And so if you have that, if that's in people's minds gearing up to a July election, and Tories are really shooting themselves in the foot there. But equally, Rishi Sunak, not very good at politics. He doesn't seem to have a correct political instinct at all. So that might even, he's like, yeah, fuck it. Yeah, I think we should still do July. I don't necessarily think it's not going to be July. I just hope it's not going to be July.
There's certainly, I mean, he was, this is just an intern at Goldman Sachs running the country. That is who we have, an intern, all right? And
I think you're massively downplaying his career in finance.
Well, can I actually say that having spoken to a couple of people at Goldman Sachs during Rishi's time, they do refer to him as the intern.
That's so funny. That's such a
I know that it's like a derogatory joke, and that is sort of a banking, bankers love to do sort of hazing like that, don't they? But they do refer to him as the intern. Yeah, he's not very good at politicking. You're right. And there is definitely a sense inside strategists' camp that they do think that they could win an election. I mean, look, not win an election necessarily, but they could definitely not have Labour wouldn't have the majority that's being predicted to them. I mean, look, let's point back to what Theresa May had to say last Thursday. She was talking about the polling, and she said that she doesn't actually think that that's particularly reflective of how people will go to the ballot box. She thinks that voters are punishing Sunak in the polls, but actually when it comes to ballot box day, they will stick with what they know because they're concerned about a potential mortgage spike again. If voters are looking at the past couple of years and they've gone, oh my God, it's been so tumultuous. We finally got down to an even keel again. We're not in a recession. We've got minimal inflation. I don't want change. Let's stick with it.
I think that's total bollocks from Theresa May, to be honest with you. I think that's, obviously she's not going to stand up and say, we're going to take a fucking hammering, boys. Let's batten down the hatches. People talk about inflation coming down and people will appreciate that target has been met. They literally will not notice that. Things will be, inflation coming down doesn't mean prices are going down.
It just means that they're rising slower.
They're rising more slowly and things have gone up. Even just anecdotally, like you and I were very famously on the same salary, but when I earned less money about 2 years ago, I felt wealthier than I do.
Well, that's
now.
because they say money can't buy you happiness, Ed.
That's true. I'm so rich now, but so sad.
Yeah.
This is a fable. No, but I think people will be like, well, I can't afford all these things. So it literally and you bastards are in charge. I've been in charge for 14 years and I can't, and my mortgage has gone up. I think that's people are, that is suggesting that people at large think like Westminster journalists. I think that's maybe that interpretation of being like, oh, we think this is important because this is one of the Conservative Party's 5 pledges that they've hit. But to Joe down the street, PoliticsJOE down the street, and you notice you can't literally, like, the price of a pint of milk has gone up to ludicrous terms, like your grocery, your weekly shop costs X amount more than it used to. That's what they notice. They don't notice even if they see the headlines about inflation going down, they're like, well, fucking why is everything still so expensive?
Typical IMF. Actually, the Chancellor is now going purely by the OBR, which, by the way, we should come on to because he's had such a tumultuous relationship with the OBR, which I think is really funny and worth getting into. But this morning, what he was explaining, Ed, if you listened to Jeremy Hunt, is that actually wages have now been rising faster than they have in recent years over the last 10 months. And it actually means that people have more, twinned with the national insurance cut. He's actually provided more disposable income for people and people are really feeling the benefit of it.
People are really feeling the benefit of, but it's all that, even that's true, but also things are so expensive.
But is it true? Because one thing that actually was being pointed out to him, which he totally ignored, was that rents have gone up because of the disastrous mini budget, and those rents have not come down again. Mm-hmm. If you actually, landlords are still putting rents up. So if you're part of the renting class, you're not experiencing any difference. If you've got a mortgage and you were on a variable rate and you didn't jump onto a new fixed rate, you might be feeling a little bit better than you did a year ago, but still you're not out of the what is the phrase, out of the mud,
woods?
Out of the woods.
I think that's the phrase you're looking for. You can say mud though. See, one thing that renters actually had really good, which I think we need to acknowledge, if we're being fair, COVID rents were unbelievably cheap.
Oh my God, you're so in like the pocket of the paymasters. Well, we had that year during COVID.
But it was amazing.
When it was cheaper.
I had friends locked into like a 2-year contract, like £500 rent.
Yeah, my rent was, I lived in the most beautiful flat you have ever seen.
Was that the one with the view?
Yeah.
That was insane.
Yeah. And it was stupid money. Like
Yeah.
it was cheaper than considerably cheaper than what I pay now for a much smaller property.
So actually, I think we should say a big, how we used to clap for the NHS? We should have a clap for the landlords for letting us do that during COVID. Thank you, landlords. You'll be getting a bigger tip this time.
Yeah. I actually tip my landlord.
So do I. I buy them Christmas presents.
Yeah, I just bend over. They're doing it anyway.
Is that in lieu of pay or is that in addition to?
In addition, I just
Okay. So no. What you're doing is soliciting sex from your landlord.
Right, back to the analysis. So, the Office of Budget Responsibility, the Conservatives have this really difficult relationship with them because when the OBR are predicting, forecasting economics that look good to them, then they really lie heavily on them. So this morning, Jeremy Hunt was like, the OBR, as they've showed, we've actually beat them out on where inflation would come down. We've beaten them to the point where they said it would come down, and they are now predicting that we'll be one of the fastest economies in the G7, So they're wonderful and they're correct. But this tricky relationship that they have with them, it's a very gaslighting relationship because just a couple of maybe 6 to 8 months ago when the OBR were predicting that GDP in the UK would be 4% lower because of Brexit, they were like,
Those fucking idiots.
They love to talk a load of crap.
You can't trust those people as far as you can throw them.
Exactly. But now it's all hate IMF, love OBR. But because the IMF, when Jeremy Hunt was over in Washington not so long ago, they were like, Britain doing very bad.
we hate those guys.
Yeah.
Another point about Rishi Sunak being bad at politics. Oliver Dowden today was warning people to stockpile food.
Well,
And prisons are full, so police are being told not to arrest anyone.
But that's why we've got to stockpile food because
5 more years. 5 more years.
We've got to stockpile food because if the prisons keep getting more and more full and then they burst and then there's just prisoners ransacking, so they'll be like, lock yourselves in your house with your 3 days of tinned food and water, and you can't drink the tap water because there's bacteria in it.
It's full of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's what they've stopped doing because they're getting fined now to dump in the rivers. The water companies are going to go, well, we're going to have to dump it in the drinking water then.
I didn't want it to come to this. And I've got the monopoly on this, so literally there's no punishment for this.
Oh no, a £300 fine.
Just poo in each other's mouths, actually. It will save us time.
You'll love that.
I've seen 2 girls, 1 cup. That.
Yeah, right.
That's the new
because
10
it's not
volts
enough
policy.
Drinking water.
Yeah, you've got to...
and nothing to do with that viral video.
No, nothing. So Oliver Dowden's, you have to stop. He's like, they're warning that enough people don't have food stockpiled. Don't frighten us. Why should we have that? We don't have hurricanes in this country. We don't have natural disasters. Is it an impending war that you're planning?
Well, I suppose you could
floods,
extrapolate that out and you could say something like, I don't think it's as extreme as this, but do you know sort of like how Margaret Thatcher had the Falklands and like Michael Foot looked like paled in comparison, because there was an argument that he wouldn't be able to take Britain into war and he wouldn't be able to whatever, and Margaret Thatcher could. What Oliver Dowden is doing here is saying Starmer wouldn't even give you the warning to stockpile food. We're the guys who know how to take you into a war on food.
Guys, we've been in power for 14 years. We know just how vulnerable the British state is.
Yeah.
We're going to see total societal collapse. And vote us in because we're warning you.
When Keir Starmer was at the CPS, he never even told you to stockpile food.
No.
So.
And look, there was prisons, and the prisons weren't full then. So was he really being a good director of CPS?
We've packed them to the gunnels.
He wasn't arresting enough people.
Yeah. Back in Starmer's day, you could actually be, you could have a decent living arrangement in Wandsworth Prison. Not under us.
Your human rights were respected.
Yeah.
And we can't have that.
Yeah, and that's why we're taking us out the ECHR.
Anyway, vote for us. 5 more years. 5 more years.
Take off that rainbow lanyard.
Yeah, their grid management isn't brilliant. And also, as well, Paula Venables at the Post Office Inquiry.
Crying.
Well, yeah, but like being like, anyway, enough of like that's something to distract from like that's news. That's like news that Rishi Sunak doesn't really have to take any flack for. She can just be the villain for today.
Yeah.
But he's like, I'm gonna ruin summer. Actually, that's quite a niche. Like that's actually quite a niche complaint in that it's going to ruin my summer if there's a general election.
Yeah, because the Horizon victims would say something like, it ruined their lives.
Yeah, true, actually. But what was more important, my next 6 weeks? What's more important, me going to Glastonbury or their lives?
But it's important to remember about the Horizon scandal that it's not party political. It's actually a crossbench issue.
Mm-hmm.
Lib Dem, Labour and Conservatives are all culpable for what went on during the Horizon scandal, because it went from the coalition government it went from the Labour government into the coalition government. So no one's hands are clean here. It's not one of those ones where Starmer can go, how dare you have done this? Because he's kind of like, oh God, well, Pat McFadden was actually the Post Office Minister at one point and he's in my shadow cabinet and oh no.
That might bring us on nicely to actual PMQs.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Should we talk about Keir Starmer's question on the duty of candour?
The infected blood scandal is shocking, truly shocking, but it's not unique. The story is familiar. Concerns raised but ignored, reports written but not acted on, victims and their families campaigning for years just to be heard. So I want to focus in, if I may, on the duty of candour, or lack of it, which has been a failing in scandal after scandal, injustice after injustice, from Grenfell to Horizon, Hillsborough, and now infected blood. And I've read the government has called for evidence about the duty of candour in health, but I can't think of a single example where that duty of candour should not apply to all public servants across the board. And I don't think it's possible for any of us to stand at these dispatch boxes and honestly say, never again, unless we address it. So does the Prime Minister agree that the time has now come for the duty of candour to be clearly enshrined in law across the board?
Mr. Speaker, I am, of course, aware of the recommendation made by Sir Brian Langstaff in the final report of the inquiry in relation to duties of candour and accountability, and indeed my honourable friend previously introduced the duty of candour into the health service. It is important that the government takes time to fully digest the gravity of the findings of the report. The wrongs which have been committed are devastating and life-altering for so many. Ensuring that nothing like this ever happens again is a priority, and of course we are sympathetic to that and going through the recommendations in detail at the moment before providing a comprehensive response. But of course, given the situation and the gravity of the findings, it's a recommendation that there is an enormous amount of sympathy for.
Keir Starmer.
Thank you. I understand the Prime Minister wants to look at the recommendations in detail and to come back to them in due course. But we can't look away on this duty of candour. So can I at least ask the Prime Minister to expand the call for evidence on the duty of candour beyond health? We do owe that to the victims of Hillsborough and Horizon. And to work across the House to establish a far-reaching and binding duty of candour just as quickly as possible.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman will remember on Monday I said very specifically that the patterns and behaviour that we had seen in this appalling tragedy have been replicated in others, and I mentioned Hillsborough specifically. So I'm very aware that there are structural and behavioural cultural problems that we do need to fix. The duty of candour is something that, as I said, the principle, and there is an enormous amount of support for the principle of and sympathy for. He will understand we are digesting the full contents of the report, but of course we want to right the wrongs of the past and crucially ensure that nothing like this happens ever again.
So that's Keir Starmer there, and he's asking for, this is what I was talking about earlier, about he was trying to get Rishi Sunak to make commitments. And so that was sort of like giving like a little kind of inkling into potentially Starmer is concerned about calling a general election because he wants these commitments to be sort of enshrined by the previous, the incumbent government before he presumably gets in. So commitments: agreed to a duty of candour to be enshrined into law, promise to deliver on all the report recommendations by the end of the year, promise those who silence whistleblowers that they will no longer be able to work in the NHS, and agree that the culture of the NHS needs to change. A bit weird that we're gagging whistleblowers. It's giving Boeing.
Well, gagging's better than
But they didn't
allegedly
do that.
dying.
Listen. That was nothing to do with Boeing.
No?
It all happened accidentally.
Oh, just like people die in Putin's Russia.
How is Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't know. He hasn't replied to me in a while.
No?
No. What's interesting there was the duty of, talking about the duty of public candour in other areas of life. I wonder if he expects that or would like that to extend to MPs. Because I think there's such short-termism in politics that if you're seen to apologise or take culpability or something, you're like, well, that's my career over. I couldn't possibly. And so people are so, there's people, well, in this government, in this parliament. Are you okay?
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
For those that were just looking around the room, there's people have stood up and lied to the House. There's been no acceptance of doing anything wrong. Like Boris Johnson lied about Partygate. If there was if he was, in fairness, this would require, I don't know, them taking any standards seriously in the House of Commons, which I think
that's a really good point.
I'm not certain that they would take seriously. But does he want this to extend to MPs and members of his own potential government?
We were talking about the good chap theory the other day, weren't we?
And it's death.
About how parliamentary procedure pretty much relies on you following the rules, not you, MPs following and abiding by the rules, but there's no actual punishment if they don't.
Yeah.
So like when Boris Johnson misled the House, it's his duty to come back and correct the record, but he doesn't have to.
No. And he still gets to be Prime Minister.
Well, unless 56 MPs slither off and put in a letter and then call a leadership election.
Yeah, but that happened 6 months later, 7 months later? Longer, maybe.
And well, it didn't even happen in the end, did it? I think the letters had gone in, and Johnson had already quit. Johnson was acting like the final days of Rome, like the fin de siècle of the Johnsonian government is actually like objectively quite funny.
Oh, mental.
Like
yeah.
When he was like rumoured to be like not sleeping, ringing people up, like his closest allies, being like, "How dare you!" Like, it's quite funny. Like this guy just trying to cling on to power as if he's holding like a bar of soap. Oh, you should be in prison with a bar of soap.
Oh my God.
But it's too full. Sorry, I was doing the FBPE thing. Sorry.
Oh.
It's a joke.
You have to announce when you're doing FPPA, so I'm primed for it.
Okay.
I thought also as well the point about Grenfell, Horizon, Hillsborough and infected bloods, all these things that have happened years and years ago, and we've only just seen justice for them. I wonder when...
Grenfell hasn't seen justice.
People, or even just people with cladding. So, or like, no, Grenfell, yeah, you're right actually, but what in 40 years' time are the people whose houses are now worth nothing?
Well, worse than that, they're trapped. They actually can't
traps.
move.
Yeah. Trapped in a building that could go up in flames.
Can you imagine that? The people who are living there with fire wardens on site at all times. Also, what can the fire warden actually do? Because if it's anything like Grenfell and the way that that's set on fire, a fire warden standing there going, "Yes, it's on fire." I don't know how conducive.
We have fire wardens in this office. And I don't know what
you have them in every office.
But I think what does their like? They're not, but they're not firefighters.
That's insurance, isn't it? That's like a totally different thing. That's
I'm not
for them to go.
I'm not saying it's the same thing. But I mean, like, are these people are those fire wardens? Do they have the same role as our fire wardens?
Much, yeah.
Just being like, oh, fire,
get out.
Excuse me, I recommend you leave now. Don't take anything with you. No, it's horrific.
Should we do the next clip?
Yes.
In the wee small hours of Saturday morning, I received an email, and I apologise for my language, Mr. Speaker, calling me a fucking parasite, a rat and a piece of shit. This came in response to my challenging the appropriateness of a US citizen, Michael Francesi, who is doing a tour in the UK and as part of that tour advocating publicly for the self-proclaimed misogynist influencers Andrew and Tristan Tate. who are encouraging toxic attitudes among young men in this country. Can I ask the Prime Minister, who has spoken about banning hate preachers from entering the UK, if he will extend this to misogynists?
Mr. Speaker, those who seek to divide us, undermine our values, and indeed intimidate and threaten others have no place in our society, and we will not hesitate to use not just the full force of the law, but also our immigration regime to make sure we have security and cohesion in this country.
So that was Alison Thewlis there explaining the vile comments that were sent to her after she challenged the appropriateness of Michael Franzese, a former mafia mob boss and advocate of the Tate brothers, that after she challenged the appropriateness of him performing in Glasgow. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I remember being the recipient of this sort of language for quite some time, and it was also someone who I think, well, one of the people mentioned in this, two of the people mentioned in this actually wrote to me.
they wrote to you?
Yeah.
That's a very kind way.
Yeah, they wrote to me. No, but they did tweet at me. And I was like, well, that's mental.
Yeah, no, that was mental.
But, okay. Clearly, there was so much else going on that I didn't really dwell on it. I was just like, okay. But yeah, I mean, look, who among us hasn't been called a parasite, a rat, and a piece of shit?
Me.
No, but her point is valid in that she's not even really speaking for herself. She's talking about if in any other setting this happened, there would be a complaints procedure that you could go through. You could take it to HR. You could take it to the police. Some reason when it's online, it's not policed at all.
It's also as well, I suppose, speaks to the how prominent women are treated in terms of, if I was to criticise Andrew Tate, Tate guys might call me like a cuck beta.
I think you would get called pussy boy.
I'd get called pussy. I think I would be called pussy boy. But like, that's nothing to do with like the level of abuse that you would get, for instance, or the language used, or the actual threats.
You should stop sending me those.
Well, I'm trying to perfect them, but I think it's like there is a level of rank misogyny against all kind of prominent women. Men just don't receive this level of abuse. I don't even think. Well, I think it's women of colour who are the most attacked online. It always surprises me that if I tweet something similar to someone who works at another outlet, but she's a woman of colour, the different responses that we get, hers are so heavily racially charged compared to the ones. Mine are just like stupid bitch. Hers are like stupid bitch with like something racist in there as well. Yeah. Like, yeah. But I don't think that you're ever going to solve this until we're kind of in this sort of lull period where online you can have this anonymity. And I'm not talking about anonymity on, say, something like, I don't know, like a forum like Reddit. I understand why you want to have your anonymity because you can take part in forums and, like, you know, you might want to leak something. I get it. Something as... not that Reddit's not commercial, but like something as front facing as Twitter or X or Instagram, I don't understand why you're allowed to have your anonymity on those sites or Facebook even. I think that you should have to have a credit card that is linked to your account. Really?
And I don't think that you necessarily should have to put your name on your account, but I think that there should be some kind of, not necessarily even a credit card, but some back end way of identifying you. That if you do something, and this is straying into, I don't want this to sound like I'm getting into a kind of thought police or policing what you have to say, because I genuinely don't believe in state intervention or I believe in, you know, quite laissez-faire when it comes to how you interact with each other. But there has to be some kind of culpability for, if you're a child molester, why are you allowed to have your anonymity online? Why aren't the Metropolitan Police allowed to request certain documents or certain message threads from these data companies? Why are they allowed that privacy? The power that big tech has in this country, I think, is astonishing. And we're doing it in the name of free speech. And actually, it's not free speech at all. You're actually just allowing proper crimes to be committed.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I disagree with you in terms of I wouldn't personally want big tech's got a lot of my data anyway. I wouldn't like to voluntarily be obliged to give them more, especially not something as sensitive as credit card details.
I get that, but what I also think is that big tech has so much of your information that actually they would be able to identify you very, very easily, but they choose not to hand that information over to the police. And I get that it's a slippery slope. I really do understand that. But I think in the case of, like, as I've just said, child molestation, which is rife, genuine threats. I'm not talking about someone being called a fuckwit, because to be honest, I think you should just wash that off your back. I don't think that matters. But if someone is making genuine threats to your life, genuine rape threats against you, why on earth is big tech concealing that person's identity? You know?
Do you think, has misogyny in the UK, do you think it's gotten, has it stayed the same or has it gotten worse in public discourse, do you think?
I think it's become sexy to be misogynist again.
Yes, I think it's cooler. It's cooler to be misogynist than it was.
Yeah.
Thanks to people like Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
You see the people talk about in schools, like teachers being totally disrespected and demeaned by teenage boys. When 10 years ago it was cool to be a feminist.
Have you seen the fat shaming's back?
Fat shaming's back.
Fat shaming is back. It's all linked, I think. We're kind of having this sort of like early 2000s
We're
revival.
regressing.
Because have you seen the trend on TikTok about big backs?
No.
Yeah, there's like a big back shaming. Like if someone's
Have you got big arse?
Yeah, like it's like a thing. No, like actual back. Like people will comment like that person's got a really big back. Like
What the
it's a
fuck?
trend.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And it's also, the rise of Ozempic. Skinny's back on the menu.
Skinny's
and
back on the
fat
menu.
shaming is the main course.
Yeah, but there's this rise of kind of un-PC-ness, political incorrectness almost has become trendier, and you've got people railing against. Actually, you see it in government. You see people railing against rainbow lanyards in a way that you wouldn't have seen 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We were progressing. More rights for everyone. More rights for everyone. More rights for everyone. And that's less rights for everyone. Less rights for everyone.
It's something that, so I'm going to interview Dawn Butler after this, but it's something that she's put in her book where she talks about how structures of power and the people who the structure works for rally against breaking those structures down, obviously. And there's this really interesting bit where she talks about this very right-wing journalist, who he gets given a position, a governmental position, advisory role. Dawn Butler tweets explaining that he goes on the BBC, I think it was BBC, talking about previous social media posts that he'd made that she felt were racist, or she felt weren't conducive to working in a government advisory role. This right-wing journalist had to stand down, and then he came after her relentlessly,
really?
like wrote pieces about her, just like any spare moment, just sort of like went to go and tear her down. And she's talking about him being sort of like the pinnacle person of like who the structure works for. He got promoted, he got to the position he did because he is who he is, where he went to school, all of that. And she is a black woman from London, just, describes herself as working class. And she's now got the same agency as him, and he can't stand it.
Yeah. Power does not like being split. The systems of power. And so do you think, so there is a retaliation towards like more traditional values or reaction in a direction with like the new conservatives?
Sorry, I extrapolated out a little bit. I just think people think that they just think it's sexy.
It's sexy.
To be misogynist.
It's sexy. And we're here to tell you that it's not.
Well, I guess there's online, like, what's the word? Not like what's the karma equivalent? Like Reddit karma. There's clout in, yeah. There's clout in being like, shut up, you stupid woman.
Yeah, my Facebook group, Shut Up, You Stupid Woman, has 10,000 members, and we're making t-shirts.
They just post photos of the sandwiches that they were forced to make. Because
the men are unhappy. Like, she's with Chad and you're making your own sandwiches.
But anyway, don't worry everyone, because now women are allowed in the Garrett Club. All of this is about to change.
Very good. Shall we do Kate Osborne?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
England's Chief Medical Officer said that reducing sewage in rivers and seas is a public health priority, highlighting the problems dumping untreated sewage causes. Even the treated sewage, which is continuously discharged into rivers and seas, contains faecal matter. Water firms are now asking for bills to go up by up to 91% when they've paid out billions to shareholders and neglected pipework and infrastructure. So, Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister tell me why is his government allowing these companies to destroy our waterways and make obscene levels of profit whilst making people ill?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the level of overflows we've seen is unacceptable, but we have gone further than any other government, monitoring 100% of overflows, up from only 7% under Labour, investing record amounts in our water infrastructure, enshrining in law strict targets, and introducing unlimited fines for water companies to hold them to account. But when it came to this House, the party opposite couldn't even vote for their own policy. And that's because there's only one party with a plan to protect the environment, the Conservative Party.
So Kate Osborne there talking about the state of water in England and Wales, which I think, to be honest, can't be talked about enough. I was at a protest on Saturday in Brighton by Surfers Against Sewage as mass paddle out. There was ones all over the country basically objecting to the levels of pollution and sewage in our waters. And just last week there was crazy stories about, in Devon, the parasite that was making people ill in water. It was revealed they were dumping water into sewage into Lake Windermere.
Famously a Taylor Swift reference.
Lake Windermere?
Yeah.
Is it? Why?
It's on folklore. On folklore? Those Windermere peaks feel like the perfect place to cry.
Oh, wow. Really?
Because you've got to repopulate the lake with tears because there's so much shit in it.
There's so much shit in it?
Yeah.
Do you know how much...
Cry at the shit.
Do you know how much people affected in Devon were... do you know how much they were offered in compensation?
Yes. No, sorry. Because of the... Yeah. What was it?
£115.
That was the graphic. I thought that was a really funny graphic we did.
I think, but is all these companies are run for profit?
If you like us here, you should
dividends.
go and look at our graphics.
Yeah, look at our graphics on Instagram. If all these water companies are giving huge dividends to shareholders. Billions of pounds have been paid out in dividends since privatisation of water, and they've done basically nothing to improve it. And now there's literal shit in the water. Mm-hmm. And people are getting, okay, well, we've made all this money, but we're only giving you £115 and you don't have any water. If I was in charge of a water company, I would simply make sure there were no parasites in the water.
But that's why you're not in charge of a water company.
That's true, actually. I'm too ethical.
Yeah.
I've got ethics.
What you need to do is take the government subsidy and then give it to the shareholders, and then that's how you get onto the board.
That's true. I met a guy on Saturday who said his dad was deaf in one ear because he swam in sewage when he was a child.
Well, you shouldn't have been swimming in the sewage, should
I don't think he knew, Ava.
Well, I guess they didn't have the Surfers app then, did they?
No, that's the point as well they were making about lots of people come in the summer, go to places like Brighton or other waterways around the UK and just don't know there's sewage there.
Because why would you think that?
Yes, no, it's meant.
Like, why would you think there might be sewage in this? Do you know where it was really bad? A few years ago, a lot of people used to swim in the River Lee in Hackney. It was like a really big... Yeah, you turn your nose up at it now, but it didn't used to be like that. It used to...
I'm just suspect of swimming in a river in London.
No, because it's not connected to the...
Okay.
I think it's... Oh God, someone's going to correct me and I'm going to look like such a stupid cunt. I don't think it's connected to the Thames, but I'll happily be corrected. Mm-hmm. Fergal Sharky, let me know.
Fergal, if you're listening.
Anyway, it was a really nice place to go swimming, and actually a friend of mine got... Well, we now think it was like E. coli.
Holy shit.
I have never seen someone sicker in my life. I don't want to talk about it, but like every single orifice, there was something coming out of it.
Pissing, shitting, vomiting.
It was like even
very
his ears out of his.
Oh my God.
It was unbelievable. No, not really. I mean, it was just so bad.
It was just like a sprinkler.
It was so bad.
That's awful. That's what someone warned. A select committee, a clean water campaigner warned someone in Parliament. Someone is going to die from E. coli in this summer.
That's mad. That isn't it?
It's astonishing. So we've got shit in our rivers, prisons are full, so they're not arresting criminals. You're having to stockpile food, and that's why
Kids' teeth are falling out
kids'
because
teeth are
there's no
falling out.
dentists.
You can't sell your house because it's covered in flammable cladding. But inflation's come down.
No, keep going.
So
Potholes. The potholes have never been more out of control. You can't get a GP appointment.
they're going to get rid of all the funding for universities by limiting the number of international students coming.
You can't wear a rainbow lanyard anymore.
You can't be trans.
Well, surely soon you won't be able to protest.
Soon you won't be able to protest.
So you're going to have to sit down and eat your dinner.
And it's also very hard for you to vote.
Oh, very hard for you to vote.
Forget your ID.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Ava?
No, we've got to skedaddle.
You've got to skedaddle because you've got a hot date at Westminster
Yeah.
with Don Butler.
Yeah. What about you?
Well,
There'll be a Mari Black interview for you guys to watch later as well.
Yes, friend of PoliticsJOE, former guest.
Deputy leader of the SNP.
In Westminster.
In Westminster. Sorry, I thought that would be obvious because I interviewed her in Westminster.
I want it. I know you know that. I want them to know that you know that.
Well, I didn't know that, so.
Thank you everyone for listening to the PoliticsJOE podcast. Make sure to join us on the subreddit for good faith discussion and memes. Go and see Ollie at the How the Light Gets In festival, where him and Aaron Bastani will be chatting shit about stuff. If that's not a sell, then I don't know what is. Have you got anything else you'd like to plug?
No.
No. Thank you all for listening.